Greetings, folks. Welcome back to Central Florida and a scene never documented before on this channel. Outside that fairly dusty window are familiar spots on the A-line now passing us by at 60 miles an hour. I'm on board Amtrak 91 today, rolling south to South Florida, specifically to West Palm Beach, where my brother now resides, and his college dorm would become my living accommodation for this weekend.
91 Amtrak engine 152 North clear, Plant City airlock and clear, Plant City holdout.
Cruising through Plant City, we'd be making pretty good time out of Tampa this day, departing the station only about 3 minutes late after its scheduled departure. I'd genuinely be surprised this day by the amount of riders taking the Silver Star south, as I'd be joined with at least 80 other people at the station. Arriving into Lakeland now a couple minutes early, a handful of people would get off and about a dozen would get on. From here it'd be smooth sailing to Winter Haven and south, with the next stop being Sebring.
CSX Equipment Defect Detector, milepost 865.4. No defects. No defects. Total axle or 0. End of transmission.
No defects, 91.
I wouldn't use up any more card space from here on out this day, so after arriving to West Palm and unloading the luggage, all that was left to do was sleep before our almost full day trackside starting the very next morning. First stop this day would be just north of the West Palm Brightline station. Built in 2017, the station has hosted thousands of daily trains since its opening on January 13, 2018. Compared to the older style depots and passenger platforms on the CSX side of town, Brightline has used its station construction and clean trains to show people down here the modern flair they've implemented with their private rail service. Rolling south into West Palm not a minute late would be BLF 722, slowing for its station stop here after departing Orlando just after 7 a.m. Brightline is fairly quick with their station stops, only about 3 minutes on the schedule, but this morning it'd be less than 2 as BLF 722 blasts off for Point South. Brightline symbols their trains with the same schedule every day, starting with BLF as the prefix for the trains and a 3-digit number following, always in the 700 series. 20 minutes later, I'd relocate just around the curve to the north as I'd be getting word of a morning freight coming our way, bypassing the port of Palm Beach and its small yard. We're at milepost 299.13 at Control Point City Place in downtown West Palm. Although there's signals facing both directions here, there's not many other resources to track trains, as the road channels on the radio are almost always quiet, and starting here at West Palm, the rest of the line down to Miami is one massive quiet zone, no horns. Luckily, I'd have a couple friends giving me location updates this day, and about 20 minutes after the southbound BLF 722 would come southbound FEC 101, mixed freight for Miami out of Jacksonville's Bowden Yard. FEC isn't like most other railroads, operating as a Class 1, but classified as a Class 2. Since the entirety of their main line from Jax to Miami is only 365 miles, they can get away with freight consists like this: rock, manifest, and intermodal all in the same train. It's what they've been doing for decades now, and it seems to be working just fine. Meeting the 101 on the south end of town would be a northbound Brightline BLF 720 crossing over to Track 2 for its station stop this morning. And although 720 would have signals lit through town for him for the next 10 minutes or so, BLF 723 would show first, another southbound from Orlando, this one painted in Brightline's bright pink scheme right on 101's marker lights. 2 minutes at the station, and as soon as 723 is out of sight, the LED headlights of northbound 720 appear, running on time once again, arriving to West Palm on the East Main not 90 seconds after 723 disappears. After 4 trains in about an hour, we'd head over to the CSX side of town, about a half mile from our current location. Looking north from around the corner of the Seaboard's West Palm station, we can see an approach limited indication on track 2 at what I believe to be CP Coral. Ever since this portion of the CSX was sold for tri-rail operations, the line no longer has its pages in CSX's timetables, which makes it a bit more difficult to get to know the line. In moments, it really wouldn't matter, however, as Tri-Rail train P669 would be calling signals rolling south, led by one of their 12 Brookville BL36PHs. All built around 2014, these locomotives are almost the passenger version of the freight diesel like a Jeep 40. Rated at 3,600 horsepower, these BL36s do all the pushing and pulling power on these moves, as the rear cab car is a non-powered control car. Meeting P669 at the station would be P666, northbound this morning, running a couple minutes late. On point of the 666 would be Tri-Rail cab car number 501. This car has an interesting history, as on January 28, 2016, it was involved in a derailment in Pompano Beach, which would send the 501 and the rest of its train set into a storage line at Tri-Rail's Hialeah headquarters. After about 6 years of sitting, the car would be part of a few test train operations in late 2023, and now in January 2024, it's back leading trains on the corridor 8 years after its derailment. Following P666 on approaches would be Amtrak 98, the Silver Meteor, rolling north today with a now commonplace ALC Charger trailing behind the P42. A couple hours later, I'd be back out on the FEC, as a couple more bright lines in a potential freight would draw me back. High green on the approach lit signal on the East Main would confirm a northbound, starting with BLF 722. The topography of South Florida is unique in the sense that you can't get anything like it anywhere else. On one corner is an industrial rail-served industry, but look the other way and there's skyscrapers and roads like the massive Okeechobee Boulevard, now temporarily blocked by southbound BLF 725. Even though it's hard to get any more gentrified than it is, South Florida is still home to lots of native species, not including these iguanas. 60 years ago, they wouldn't have even existed down here if it weren't for a few Cuban cargo ships to Miami that inadvertently brought the reptiles to the Sunshine State and its tropical climate down here, which these creatures thrive in. I was so busy watching the animals in this little ditch that train P672 would catch me by surprise, meeting southbound P675 at the bottom of the S-curve to my north. I had walked over to the CSX side as I knew Amtrak 92 would soon be coming north, but the weather would change for the worst as out of the blue, or gray like the skies, it started to rain, forcing me and all the gear under a tree in a nearby park. Unfortunately, the longer and harder it rained, the less dry it became, until I gave up and walked to a parking garage on the FEC. To say that I got drenched would probably be an understatement. All of the camera gear is alright, it's all fine, it survived. However, I cannot get any of the real shots that I kind of planned on doing. So we're now in a parking garage. I'm hearing FEC 903, a local that's about to head south on the radio, and the tripod's really not going to work in this situation, so I'm going to have to make something up to make it stable and actually overlook the tracks and not just this balcony. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Hopefully the rain goes away soon, because we have FEC 206 coming as well, and I do want a ground shot of that. But I guess we'll see how long the rain will last.
FEC equipment defect detector milepost 300.1. East Main. No defects. No defects. Total axle 2-4. End of transmission.
Brightline's occupation of both East and West Mains would push that 903's departure time back a few hours when, ironically, I was not by the tracks, but at least the rain would subside to a drizzle by the time FEC 206 was rolling through town. While still extremely active on the railroad side, the FEC's very own Henry Flagler never intended for West Palm to become a large component in the South Florida Strip, originally planning the town to be a base and residential area for employees of his famed hotels along the coast further south. However, plans would change when the plans changed hands, as in 1893, George W. Potter was put in charge of surveying and mapping the first 48 blocks of the city. A year later, the area would be incorporated as an official U.S. town, becoming a city in 1903. Now part of Palm Beach County, the city is the richest in Florida and one of the richest in the entire nation, obvious by the million-dollar yachts and nightclubs along the intercoastal. Our sightseeing would be cut short, however, as I knew of a couple trains coming our way, so back to walking all the way west to the Seaboard's old SX main line, now part of the South Florida Rail Corridor. First up on the agenda tonight would be the southbound Silver Meteor, today sporting a historic consist. Leading the train south would be a duo of ALC Chargers alone. No P40 or P42 leading the way, just two of Amtrak's new locomotives that will soon completely take over the service. This is the first time ever a pair of these have led any Silver service train. Back on the FEC, green signals in each direction would signify the arrival of the hourly bright lines, beginning with BLF 727 up from the south, and BLF 732 from the north, both not surprisingly right on time. As you can tell by now, I obviously didn't mind lugging my camera gear back and forth between the two main lines here, as only a few minutes after catches along the FEC, we're back on the CSX, or now the SFRTA. Located a mere half-mile from the modern Brightline station next to the coast is Tri-Rail and Amtrak's West Palm Beach station, beautifully renovated for dozens of daily commuter trains and all silver service trains. On the south end of the station platform still stands the original Seaboard station canopy, which would be our setup spot tonight, as a few trains were in the vicinity. I'm set up at the corner of Tamarind Avenue and Fern Street next to the control point Mockingbird, and it wouldn't take long for signals here to upgrade and trains to start arriving. First customer would be P686, the second to last northbound tri-rail on the adjusted weekend schedule this Saturday. The train would be rolling to a stop by the platform here, unloading the rest of its passengers before crossing over to track 1 and getting this restricting signal into Tri-Rail's small engine and car facility just south of the station here. This would be the end of P686's day, but we'd have one more Tri-Rail to get out of the way before our train of interest arrived.
That's 7283 in the lead with a 119 trailing. Total of 50 cars. That's 24 loads, 26 empties, 3802 on the tons, and 3230 on the length. No restrictions. Is that all correct, over? That's right. All right, copy that 453. Signal indication. I have a segment at dispatch out.
That job briefing you just heard was for M453, a Central Florida usual now down here entering the corridor for its last few miles to Miami. Leading tonight's manifest would be a fresh CM44 rebuild number 7283 right out of the Huntington, West Virginia shops, glimmering in the bright LED lights of the station. It'd feel fitting to catch 453 here, a train that's been running since the Seaboard days, passing a station that's been serving since the Seaboard days. Heading back to the FEC, we'd have a couple more trains to catch before our day would end, starting with more Brightlines, which would make way for FEC train 105. Autorax and Intermodal would make up this Miami-bound beast, led by the usual LNG set, rolling through at track speed. With the exception of a few more Brightlines, this would end my Railfanning down here, as I'd only have a couple days left before riding train 92 back to Tampa. While it wasn't the most eventful freight-heavy days that occur down here, I do think my outings give a pretty good idea of the traffic down here and what to expect on especially weekends. A huge thanks to all that helped with information and tracking this weekend. It really helps a lot, especially when I'm hundreds of miles away from my usual stomping grounds. But until we meet again somewhere out there trackside, this is Christian from Multicolor Films, End of transmission.